Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications at SBAM. Welcome to today's show. It's Thursday, and on Thursdays, we like to welcome our new member of the week on behalf of our sponsor. So this week, we're welcoming a new VIP member, Kramer Technologies. This is a family business located in Howell, and they serve the automotive hoist, sales, and service industry since 2003. So welcome to Mark Kramer and family. And of course, we're welcoming them on behalf of our sponsor, Marana Group, who is a data document and distribution company in Kalamazoo. So again, welcome to Mark and thank you to Marana Group. Brian, we have a special guest today, and I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce him.
Well, thanks, Sarah. And anybody who watches our program knows that fairly regularly we have a great partner for small business and the Small Business Association of Michigan and Consumers Energy. And we got a long-standing partnership, goes back many years and working together for energy efficiency programming. And Consumers Energy just put out a very, very aggressive and exciting new goal. So we invited Greg Salisbury to come on the program to talk a little bit about it. Head of gas engineering and Consumers Energy, but this program is really, it's about how they operate, but how you operate too. And in reaching some very, I'll say, ambitious, aggressive goals by 2050. But Greg, thanks for coming on. But rather than me trying to explain it, what is it that Consumers Energy is now committing to?
Sarah, Brian, thanks for having me today. And we also appreciate the long-standing and fruitful relationship we have with you and all of the small businesses of Michigan. We recently extended our commitment to the clean energy future of Michigan by committing to net zero customer emissions from our natural gas use by 2050. So this is a big step that's complementary with our net zero methane emissions by 2030 commitment, which we announced previously, our net zero carbon from electric generation by 2040, and now taking that next step beyond our own emissions to working with the customers and the people of Michigan to offset and eliminate carbon emissions from the use of our energy by 2050. We're really excited about it. Lots of work to do, but we've been thinking about this for a while.
Yeah, and this really comes on the heels of several commitments for cleaner energy and a total transformation over recent years, but also planning here into the future. What type of difference does this make? Maybe give us a little bit of the why behind it. Why is this important? Why do our members and small businesses really need to embrace this type of a goal?
Sure thing. And we believe in getting to a clean energy future without compromise. And you might have seen in other states, sometimes going too fast in a direction can lead to adverse outcomes for small businesses. So we believe that by talking about this now and making this commitment, we can begin to work on several factors together with small businesses to get the carbon out of the atmosphere and have the cleanest possible climate in Michigan and contribute to really mitigating the effects of climate change around the planet and around our home state. We see an expansion of energy waste reduction as one of the best and most cost-effective ways to do this. And we know that the Small Business Association is already active in connecting members with our programs around smart thermostats and demand response, around rebates that are available for upgrading furnaces, insulation, and other appliances. So it starts with a win-win. Use less energy, have a more efficient building, your bills go down, your carbon footprint goes down. After that, we see adding offsets. And the first kind of offset that we'll add is offsets where a small business might choose to engage with us to offset a portion of their carbon footprint by protecting a verifiable forestry resource or expanding a forestry resource somewhere in the state. That's one of the best ways to get carbon out of the atmosphere. We're going to introduce that program in the next couple of months. and it'll be available for residences, for small businesses and big businesses. The next thing that we've been talking about and taking action on is renewable natural gas, which is making methane fuel from dairy or swine farms or from landfills or sewage treatment plants. And we recently announced a project in West Michigan with a dairy farm called Swiss Lane Farms to start making renewable natural gas from cow manure, which is actually a net negative fuel. It takes more carbon out of the atmosphere by using it than it does to not use it. So an important step in finding fuel sources right here in Michigan that are cleaner than the historical methane we might use from Texas or Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and you know what I love about this is that, you know, having worked myself in public policy over the years, is that whether you talk about dairy or swine farms or landfills, like the waste itself that is now being used is kind of like a problem. In the past, it's been a problem. Now it becomes part of a solution because of the use of technology. What an exciting time.
Yeah, it sure does, and it even eliminates the smell.
Right. Yeah. You know, it's a win-win all the way around. Now we're big believers in the idea of energy waste reduction. It's one of the reasons why we have dedicated staff at the Small Business Association of Michigan that helps our members just to identify, both to do the audits, the energy audits themselves at no cost to the member or any other small business that in Consumers Energy has been a great partner in this endeavor, and the programs are quite extensive. One of the messages that we have, and I'll go ahead and reinforce that right now to any small business watching, is that if you do have any kind of project or change that you're going to make in your physical space in your business, for heaven's sakes, don't do that without finding out what programs and what end up being subsidies, some help in paying for the cost of the updates. Of, it could be lighting, it could be your thermostat, it could be insulation, it could be windows, it could be appliances in manufacturing, sometimes like compressors. There's all kinds of programs out there, and so we have somebody, actually it's a former employee of yours, former employee of Consumers Energy, that now works here at SBAM, that does energy audits and accesses these programs for members at no cost, just a benefit to small business that comes out of this partnership that we have together. Let's talk a little bit about, before we finish up here, the smart thermostat. Why would somebody, I mean, you guys have been really into and leaders in the smart thermostats. What does that do? I think there's some kinds of misconception that somebody's like giving up control over the temperature in their house, and they just, or it could be their house or their business, and they just don't want to do that. But it's kind of a misconception, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And it's awesome technology that we can now offer through our smart thermostat program by connecting your thermostat to our third-party partners. They observe the patterns that you set in using your thermostat. And then when an event comes where there's a chance to reduce your part of peak demand and lower your bill and lower your carbon footprint, the system is not going to do anything radical. For instance, on a hot summer day, the system would pre-cool your house to maybe just a little bit colder than you would typically have it. And then when everybody else is demanding electricity from the system, your thermostat would stay at a little bit higher level and let that pre-cooling carry you through that period of high demand. And then when it's over, and it's usually only a couple hours, then your thermostat would adjust back to your normal comfort zone. Also, a smart thermostat can be set up so that when you go to bed and when it's cooler outside, or that your thermostat would either adjust to a lower heat setting in the winter or a warmer cool setting in the summer, so that you're not utilizing all that energy and adding all that cost to your bill during times when you're not going to notice it anyway. So it's not about us taking control. It's about us having technology partners who observe the patterns that you demonstrate in your business and then making little incremental changes. But if everybody participates, those little incremental changes can make a big difference.
Yeah, great explanation. It's one of the things that, one of the kind of the new things in our message to our members this year is to really think about a smart thermostat if you haven't already. It essentially, the way I think about it, you achieve your climate, your office space or your business space climate goals in a more efficient way. So it's not to change how it feels in your office, it's to help you achieve that with use of less energy. And it's a big, it's just a big benefit that is really gonna, it helps a few things. Helps with the peak demand, which is a really expensive time, but also helps to keep your bill lower. So thank you so much, Greg, for coming on. Really appreciate consumers, appreciate you being with us today and sharing some of this insight. And thanks for embracing the goals to help future generations of humans and everybody else that calls planet Earth home to have a home forever.
Sure thing, Brian, Sarah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Greg. I just want to reiterate that if you are watching and interested in learning more about what SBAM can do for you in terms of energy solutions, there's a form on our website. If you go to sbam.org/energy, you can fill out a form and we'll have our energy advocate reach out to you and explore some of those options. So it's a really great program, and we were saving members a lot of money, actually, not just energy, but saving money too. All right, so we're going to talk about some trends, some data, some reports going forward, some good, some not so good. Let's start with one that's maybe not so good, and that is inflation. A new report came out that inflation is now at a 40-year high.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's a 40-year high, beating last month's 40-year high. And I think that's what's disappointing is that we were hoping we'd see it crest. It hit in the previous month, it was 7.9%, the annualized rate, and it was 8.5 after that. But if you look at different aspects within the, so you got the regular CPI or Consumer Price Index, which is the average 8.5. That's all items. But fuel oil up 70.1%, and from year over year, gasoline 48%, used cars and trucks 35%, airline fares 23.6. Now they were low before, low demand, and the prices were low, but the piped utility gas service, we're talking about energy here. Energy, some of the biggest increases. Meats, poultry, fish, and eggs 13.7%. New vehicles 12.5%. Electricity costs up 11.1%. Again, another reason why it makes sense to look at efficiency as a way to kind of manage some of these increased costs. One thing you can, that is in your control a little more than some of these other things. But there was some hope that we would start seeing, at least it being level, not going up anymore. When we had in February record high inflation, 40-year high, it was hope that would be it, and then the following month it was up to 8.5%. So very concerning. I don't think it will change the policy response from the Federal Reserve in terms of their interest rate increase schedule, but it does seem like they're kind of pushing the expectations of inflation cooling off another quarter or so. So there was some hope that really we would see it kind of cresting and then coming down by the second half of the year. We'd see inflation, really start to come down, but not get to those 1 or 2% levels that we'd seen in the past, but at least settle down to historically regular levels of 3 and 4%. But I am noticing now that there's an expectation that they're kind of pushing that off at least another quarter, maybe fourth quarter, maybe the very beginning of the next calendar year, which is, it's disappointing, but I mean, I think everybody feels it. It's like the cost rising across the board, and it's hitting pretty much everything at this point. I gave some examples from the report in the New York Times that kind of put all the categories out there. And that's what people are feeling, that 8.5% is everything, including some things that aren't moving that much, but it's food and fuel and energy costs. Those are the things that are hitting people really hard right now. And it's starting to, there's this other thing out there called consumers' confidence, the Consumer Confidence Index. that's starting to trail off now too. And this is one of my bigger concerns, that consumer confidence tends to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. When that starts to fall, people pull back, and it actually does reduces overall demand. That can help bring prices down too, but it also comes with a softening in the economy, which of course is not what we want to see.
All right. Well, let's talk about a positive thing now, and that is 11 consecutive months of job growth.
Yeah, so there's a lot of demand out there, and I think this is another thing that anybody watching this program would, as a small business owner, would be experiencing, is that there is a lot of demand, and employers, as quickly as you can find people to fill positions, are adding and growing. And we have now seen 11 consecutive months of job growth in Michigan. We also saw the unemployment rate fall to 4.4%. So that's pretty similar to maybe the first part of 2018 in terms of the unemployment rate. Not quite to where it was right before the pandemic, but there is a the thing that's holding us back right now, it is availability of workforce itself. So the job growth, I think, even though it's great to see 11 consecutive months, there is still opportunity on the table. And that opportunity is really constrained mainly by just availability of people.
All right, well, let's talk about current workforce availability. There's a lot of different factors that come into play there. One is just the sheer number of people in the population. We've talked a little bit about this before, but 2021 was a record high for deaths. COVID played a big part, but what are some of the other contributing factors?
Yeah, that's kind of disappointing, but I guess not surprising that we did see more Americans die last year than ever, in as long as these stats have been kept, at least in the way that they are. And what was disappointing is that predictably there was COVID deaths, or that's a new factor, or a new-ish factor. We obviously 2 years in here, but the CDC numbers show that that death rates among for cancer, for diabetes, for chronic liver disease, for stroke, that all these different categories were moving up. Not as dramatic a movement as COVID as a new factor in this, but that plus all of these other things, and then also 105,000 overdose deaths last year, which is a new record as well. Overdose deaths have been on the rise for a long time, but they did seem like they were at least leveling off, and so this last couple of years seeing those increases is concerning too. And overdose deaths tend to be younger people, and so when you think about just the struggles that we have, and the way the demographics are already working against us in terms of the workforce shortages and needs that we have, these types of stats just make the overall kind of picture that much more difficult. And so there's some, it's one of those things. I hate to put out like all the bad news, but as you look at, as you're thinking about things like AI and automation, and trying to invest in different things, and are we going to somehow, is it going to be something big that changes that makes it easier to find people? Probably not. So these workforce shortage issues, I think, are going to be with us for the foreseeable future, even with ups and downs in the economy, that this is going to continue to be an issue. And looking at the CDC numbers for last year, the demographics on their own, even without death rates increasing, were not particularly encouraging. Makes it that much more difficult.
All right, it's kind of hard to shift gears after those sobering statistics, but let's talk a little bit about a positive, and that is Michigan food exports. Obviously, agriculture is a huge industry in Michigan, but 2021 saw a record year for food exports.
Yeah, this is a bright spot that we think, like in Michigan, like big three industries. You got agriculture, but we think of it like the food industry, bigger than farming, but the food industry as a whole, as things food is made and grew and processed here, and then shipped all over the world. And then you got automotive, and then tourism being pretty massive too. Automotive is very dominated by big global players, with smaller players in the supply chain. The food industry is really one that is dominated by smaller players. There are big players in the food industry for sure, but this is the heart of small business, and $2.5 billion in exports of agriculture and food from Michigan in the last year. I mean, it's about a 19% increase, so it's not an insignificant increase. And one of the bright spots, actually something that was kind of happening out of my purview, and I saw those numbers reported by the state in the last week. I was kind of surprised by it. And while I think we should probably expect, because of rising costs, that there'll be potentially another record year in terms of value in 2022. Remember, we had some rising food costs last year, but not like what we're experiencing right now. So I think it's just a legit increase, and an impressive increase in one of Michigan's mainstay industries.
All right, we've talked a lot about infrastructure. I feel like we're kind of revisiting a lot of topics that we've discussed on previous shows, but this one has something new to talk about. The legislature has proposed localized road funding, $750 million that would be in addition to what's already allocated. What would this mean, and what would it look like?
Yeah, I think this is a particularly good idea, and that's so legislature saying we want to take some of this extra money, the COVID money that they have, and they want to put it into roads, but to earmark it for counties, cities, villages, for local roads. So if you were to take $750 million and drop it into the top of the road funding formula, a lot of it goes toward the state highway system. Our state highway system is actually generally in better condition than local roads. And so what the legislature is proposing is, we're going to take some of this extra money, we're going to put it in and say it's only going to local roads. And so you would really see a bigger difference, I think, on the streets that you spend a lot of your time on, as opposed to the funding and stuff. You see the state making announcements on big road projects. It's usually bridges and roads that are freeways and highways, M roads and I roads. So this, I think, would make a big community impact, and particularly good idea. At SBAM, we've long since advocated for infrastructure improvements, and they're expensive. They're just like everything else. They're getting more expensive all the time. So unfortunately, even though the state is spending more on infrastructure than it ever has before, there's a road funding change that happened in 2015 that has resulted now in a budget a couple $2 billion a year bigger than it was before. Costs are rising very substantially in building roads, just like everything else. So the legislature earmarking some to local roads, I think, is gonna that will make a very noticeable difference.
All right, and while we're on the topic of transportation, the mask mandate has been extended on airplanes and federal transportation.
Yeah, so it's a couple weeks or 15 days, an extension of the mask mandate. The CDC, when they announced this with the Federal Transportation Commission, they cited the BA.2 variant and the increase. On average nationwide, there's an increase. It's only happening in certain areas. We should probably expect that it will, just like every other variant, that it kind of makes its way across the landscape. But they cited that. I want to see a little bit more how that goes before they lift the mask mandate. It is a bit of mixed message signaling. About 95% of the country are in low spread counties, and so that's the standard that the MED or that the CDC uses everywhere else, except for on public transportation and airplanes. So it's something that was a little controversial. They did it for a shorter extension this time, which I hope means that they really are just, want to see kind of how things go with this particular variant. Maybe we'll seriously think about pulling it back to at least match. It ought to be consistent with the rest of the recommendations they have across the country. So I don't know how likely that is. There's been a lot of advocacy to try and get this kind of one of the last few remaining restrictions lifted. So we'll see, but it's going to be at least another couple weeks.
All right, well, we'll keep everybody up to date. All right, finally today, let's talk about the Michigan gubernatorial race. There are 5 Republican candidates who have officially filed, but they might not be names that we recognize. So what are the surprises?
Yeah, this is one where there aren't too many things in politics that surprise me, but I've actually been surprised by some of the candidates who have been able to get enough signatures to get on the ballot. So we know that the governor turned in signatures, so that has happened. So she's on the ballot and will not be challenged in the Democratic primary coming up in August. On the Republican side, we are now up to 5 candidates that have turned in signatures. Now you have to have at least 15,000 valid signatures in order to qualify. So you always want to turn in more, so you have a cushion. There's always invalid signatures, people that signed twice, they didn't fill it out correctly, didn't whatever, just all kinds of technical reasons why a name could get crossed off. One of the recent filings was a fellow by the name, a pastor from Oakland County, Ralph Rebrandt, turned in 16,342 signatures. That's, could not make the ballot. They need almost all of them to be valid in order to make it. Ryan Kelly filed 20,100 signatures as well this week, so he'll be on the ballot. We talked about before. There was a gentleman from Holland, Markey was the name, who filed. Michael Brown, who was a previous captain of Michigan State Police, filed his signatures either early this week or late last week. And then, of course, Garrett Saldano, who's really, of the ones who have filed so far, is really the one that is the most famous, if you will, led the petition initiative to reduce the emergency powers during the pandemic, and successfully. And so he had turned in so far, I think, of all the Republican candidates, the highest number of signatures. So, and you can do up to 30,000. We need 15,000 valid. So 5 candidates now that are on the ballot, and I think that there will be 3 or 4 more before next week when the filing deadline hits. So the Republican field is probably going to have 8 or 9 candidates, and that will be for the primary election in August. So expect there to be a very, very active, maybe loud primary season here on the Republican side of the ticket. We'll see how it all shakes out in August, and it'll get down to the 2 main candidates, Gretchen Whitmer versus one of these Republican candidates.
All right, that is all we have for you today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll be back here on Monday.
All right, thanks everybody. See you on Monday.